Hi everyone, so welcome to today's training. Today we're going to talk about 1099s. So what is a 1099? How do you know if you should be receiving 1099s? What do you do if you receive a 1099? And who should you be issuing 1099s to? Okay, so 1099s, there's a variety of them. And a 1099 is an informational return. And it is a return that the IRS is going to use to collect information from a business about other businesses or other individuals that essentially have received some sort of compensation. Okay, so perhaps compensation for a service provided, compensation for rent, there could be compensation for interest, and compensation for dividends paid. Okay, those are the main 1099s you'll be dealing with as a small business owner. So let's talk about who is required to issue 1099s. So businesses issue 1099s, and they issue them to a variety of different people. Okay, so it used to be that we had a form 1099 MISC, which stands for 1099 miscellaneous, and that had non-employment compensation along with other forms of payment such as rent. Okay, now we have 1099 miscellaneous along with form 1099 NEC. So Form 1099 NEC is now the form for non-employment compensation. Okay, so I'm going to show you the Form 1099 NEC, the Form 1099 miscellaneous. We're also going to talk briefly about 1099 INT, which stands for 1099 interest, and then 1099 DIV, which stands for 1099 dividends. Okay, then I'm going to show you this form right here, the W-9, but first we're going to go over 1099 NEC. This is going to be probably the most common 1099 that you are going to see, either that you are going to receive or that you are going to issue. Okay, so 1099 NECs are issued by businesses to either another business or an individual who has provided services. Okay, and they're not a W-2 employee, they're an independent contractor. Okay, so let's just look over the Form 1099 NEC really quickly. You can see here, this is information about the payer. So this is information about the business that has paid that individual or other business. And then you're going to have information about the recipient. So the individual or the business who received the payments. Okay. You're going to have the non-employee compensation here. And then you're going to have some information about federal income tax withheld, state tax withheld. Okay? Some 1099s have to be filed on a state level. And this depends on the specific state, okay, in which the recipient lives in or in which the payer resides. So you may have to file these 1099 forms, even though these are federal forms. You may also need to file them on a state and possibly a local level. Okay? Now, when you have somebody who is coming to do work for your business, and they are an individual or they are a business that is going to be providing services, okay, they're not selling goods to you, they're providing services, such as a contractor that's coming in as an advertiser, okay? You need to collect some tax information from them. That's facilitated via Form W-9. W-9, as you can see, it's the request for taxpayer identification number and certification. Okay? So this is the information for a W-9. Right here, they're going to provide their information, the contractor is, possibly a business name if it's a business, and then they're going to tell you how they are taxed. Okay, this is really important because you'll see here that there's individuals or sole proprietors or single member LLCs. You're also going to see there's a C corporation, S corporation, partnerships. You can have an LLC taxed as one of these. This is really important because certain designations do not receive 1099 NECs. Okay, such as a C corporation and an S corporation. They generally do not receive 1099s unless they meet some other requirements, okay? So they potentially could, but generally they do not, okay? So when you have a contractor come on board, my suggestion is before you pay them, you need to have them fill out the W-9. Before I even have somebody do services for me, I have them fill out a W-9. Because what's going to end up happening is if that individual refuses to fill out this W-9, you are required to withhold income tax from their payments. Okay, so you're required to withhold tax. If you don't ask them to fill out a W-9 until after you've already paid them, that ship has sailed, right? You can't go back and withhold payment. So you need to have this filled out really when you're signing the contract with them, okay? But before you pay them. Now, if you're in the position and you're like, I've already paid these people, I don't know, just send them the W-9, okay? Do right moving forward, but send them the W-9 now. If they refuse to fill it out, okay, there are some steps where you need to ask them to fill out the W-9 a couple of different times, okay? And then if they refuse, you file the 1099 with the information that you have, and then you make note on the 1099 essentially that they refused. So there's a process for that. You don't just say, oh, okay, well, I already paid them. I can't get a W-9. Now what do? I'm just going to ignore it. Don't do that, okay? There's a process for that. So you're going to collect the information with the W-9. Then you're going to fill out the 1099 NEC, okay? 1099 NEC and the 1099 miscellaneous. You are not going to file these if you have paid that vendor via a method in which will trigger a 1099-K. I'm going to explain that in a minute, okay? So the 1099 NEC is for non-employment compensation. 1099 miscellaneous looks very similar, okay? But it's going to be for some different payments, right? So you'll notice here, box number 1 is rent, okay? Right here, this gives us a lot of information about who is going to receive a 1099 miscellaneous. So a 1099 NEC, the threshold on that is $600. Okay, a 1099 miscellaneous, you're going to have if you have paid at least $600 in rents, prizes and awards, medical and health care payments, and payments to an attorney. So notice here, payments to an attorney. Okay, those go on this 1099 miscellaneous, and you will notice that just like that 1099 NEC, there is an area for you to put the federal income tax withheld and your state tax withheld. So up here, box 4, your federal income tax withheld. Down here, box 16 is your state tax withheld. Okay, so you can fill all of this out, and then you need to put if you've withheld anything. And this may need to be filed on a state or local basis as well, just like the 1099 NEC, okay? So, steps to determine who you need to file 1099 NECs or 1099 miscellaneous for, okay? You need to determine if you, for 1099 NEC, if you have paid at least $600 to a business or an individual for a service. Okay, if you have done that and they're not subject to 1099-K, which I'll get to in a minute, you need to have a W-9 form on file for them. Okay, same thing with the 1099 miscellaneous. If you meet any of these, you need to get a W-9 form on file, and they may need to have a 1099 miscellaneous. Now, remember, 1099s are for businesses to issue, okay? An individual does not need to do this. So an individual isn't going to go in and say, oh, I paid my landlord rent, I need to file a 1099 miscellaneous. These are for businesses, okay? So those are the 1099 miscellaneous, 1099 NEC. Now, what is this exception that I'm talking about with a 1099-K? Okay, let me actually pull up the 1099-K for you. 1099-K is a form that is issued by payment processors, okay? So what exactly is a payment processor? Payment processor is going to be things like PayPal, Stripe, Square, okay? Anybody that is processing money, credit cards, bank transfers, okay? So people who are processing, or companies who are processing payments for your business, they are going to issue a 1099-K, okay? Now, we don't want to have a 1099-K issued to a vendor because we paid them with a credit card, and then to also then issue them a 1099 NEC, okay? So if you have payments that may contribute to this 1099K, you don't include those on your 1099 NEC or 1099 miscellaneous. Those are going to be things like if you have paid via a credit card, you will not put that amount on a 1099 NEC or 1099 miscellaneous, okay? If you have paid via a credit card, if you have paid via like a bank transfer, but you did it through PayPal, Square, Stripe, QuickBooks, those count towards the 1099K, all right? Now, if you've like wired money through your bank platform, you have like a bill pay platform, and you've wired money, that amount isn't being reported anywhere on a 1099K, right? That amount needs to be reported on a 1099 miscellaneous or a 1099 NEC. Okay, so 1099Ks are going to be like credit card payments, any sort of payment processor. Like if you are directed to Stripe, PayPal, Square, QuickBooks, you don't report those payments. All right, if you are processing these through your bill payment system, that is through your bank, then you will include those. Okay, and some people get caught up in the semantics here of the 1099K where they're going to say, well, 1099Ks are only issued if it's in excess of $20,000, but I only paid this vendor $5,000. You don't have to worry about the total amount, okay? It's up to the payment processor to worry about that. You just worry about whether or not you've paid them through a payment processor. Okay, so those are 1099s miscellaneous and 1099 NEC. Now let's talk about 1099 dividends, 1099 DIV, and 1099 interest, which is 1099 INT. Okay, 1099 interest is issued by a payer of interest to a business or an individual in which they paid interest to. Okay, so you may have seen this on your personal side, right? Like if you have a savings account and you accrue interest, you may receive a 1099 INT. Your business, the same way, may receive a 1099 INT if you have like a savings account for your business. Okay, that's what that is. It's just the bank reporting to the IRS the amount of interest that they've paid you. All right. If you have paid somebody interest as a business, you may be required to file Form 1099 INT. Okay, that may trigger a requirement for you to file that form. 1099 DIV is dividends. So a business that pays a shareholder dividends is going to issue a 1099 DIV. So a C corporation is the business that is going to be issuing a 1099 DIV here. Okay, and generally we see this like if we hold stock and that stock has issued dividends, we're going to receive a 1099 DIV. But if you own a C corporation and that C corporation has paid you dividends, guess what? Your C corporation needs to issue a 1099 DIV. Okay, some people miss that when they have a C corporation. If you've taken dividends from your C corporation, your C corporation should be issuing a 1099 DIV. Okay, so what happens if you receive these forms? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your business has received a 1099 NEC from somebody. Okay, first off, check to make sure it's accurate. I have seen where 1099 NECs or 1099 miscellaneouses are not accurate. If it is not accurate, reach out to the issuer of those forms and ask them to correct it. Okay? If they disagree with you, just keep a documentation of you communicating with them in the event that you're audited. Okay? And just keep a documentation of all the payments you've received from them. So if you receive one of these forms, you want to check to make sure it's accurate. And you want to check to make sure that it's not double reported, right? I've seen that happen before where somebody's been a little bit confused and they have issued a 1099 NEC to a vendor who is going to be receiving a 1099K because they paid like through a credit card. If that happens, you just want to make sure that the total amount of income that you're reporting is not less than the 1099K and the 1099 NEC, okay? Because if it is, it's going to be a red flag. The IRS uses these to match income to your tax return. It's very easy for the IRS to see if you have had $100,000 worth of 1099 NECs issued to you, and you claim that your business only brought in $50,000. Well, there's a difference there, right? The IRS is going to take a look at it. It's really easy for them to say, well, you must be missing a 1099 somewhere, okay? And so the IRS is going to do that, but you just want to check for accuracy, okay? You need to be reporting all of your income anyways, regardless of whether or not you receive a 1099. So one of the mistakes that I see for contractors is they will wait and they'll just tally up their books based on their 1099 NECs. That's not going to fly in an audit. And you don't know if that individual properly issued you a 1099, right? So you're required to claim that income regardless of whether or not you have received a 1099. I have seen before where we have had clients come in who are delinquent on their taxes by 5 or 6 years, right? So they'll come in and they're delinquent on their taxes. Well, one of the things that we have to check on that tax return is whether or not that business issued 1099s. So that's part of us preparing that delinquent tax return a lot of times. So what's going to happen is that business may prepare a 1099 5 years later. If you didn't claim that income, that business goes and prepares the 1099s and submits them to the IRS, you may go under audit because of that. It may trigger an audit, a mismatch there, and the IRS is going to say, wait a minute, we've received this 1099, and we can see where it is supposed to have been, like you should have claimed this income and you didn't. So we're going to send you a letter asking why, right? And they may audit you because they're going to be wondering where that income is represented on your tax return. Other issues that I see sometimes with a 1099 is going to be if you have entered the wrong EIN information, or if you've entered your social into a payment processor site and it really should be your EIN, right? So the payment processor may issue a 1099-K to your social security number when really it should have gone to your S corporation. So you're actually claiming the income on your S corporation, but the IRS is going to see that you didn't claim the income from the 1099 NEC on your personal tax return. That can also create issues. So if you see that happen, just check your EIN or check the social. Make sure that the correct tax identification number is on that 1099. If it's not correct, reach out to the vendor and let them know. If they, or not the vendor, but the business that issued you the 1099, if they're not going to change it, you may just want to proactively include an explanation in your tax return, right? For example, like another scenario where that may come into play is if you have done a GoFundMe or something like that, like you had something happen and you raised funds through a GoFundMe, and those transactions are not taxable to you because they were gifts, but you're going to get a 1099, and then the IRS is going to say, oh, well, you have this 1099 showing income, but income isn't actually taxable because it's not income, right? It's gifts. But you may want to be proactive and explain that on your tax return so the IRS doesn't come looking for it later, okay? So that is it for 1099s. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I will see you guys next week.